the summer of 2010, the world was graced with a little niche film by the name of Scott Pilgrim vs. the World. You may have heard of it, and although it didn't do that hot in the box office, it became a cult classic when the home release hit, and that's when little 12-year-old me finally got a chance to watch it. Renting it on demand for 48 hours and watching it over and over. Seriously, my first weekend with this movie, I think I legit watched it 10 times in a row, breaking it up with some Adventure Time and regular show reruns here and there. God, I miss 2010. This movie sent me down a Scott Pilgrim rabbit hole. Before the year was out, not only did I 100% the video game, but I was fortunate enough to have my mom buy me all 6 volumes of the graphic novel for Christmas that year. And from the moment I read those novels, my perception on the movie started to change a little bit. And now, 13 years later, while I still love this movie, I've been pretty salty that it was the most accessible version of the story, because it only scratches the surface of what makes Scott Pilgrim special. I mean, I love the cast and I love Edgar Wright's directing, but at the end of the day, it's an extremely abridged version of the story that lets Scott off the hook, consequence-free, and ultimately lacked a lot of the character arcs and nuance that makes the story special. Again, I'm always gonna love this movie, but it's more of a Scott Pilgrim simulator than it is a Scott Pilgrim experience. And for so many years, I dreamed of getting the proper Scott Pilgrim experience on the small screen. When the movie dropped in 2010, Adult Swim and Titmouse produced a short adapting the opening chapters of Volume 2. And this short wasn't just promotional material for the movie, it was testing the waters for a full-length animated series. That unfortunately just didn't pan out. The game always remained the closest thing we would get to an authentic Scott Pilgrim experience. Something that explored the world of this series in a way a 2-hour movie just never could. I longed for an animated series to come along and truly do all 6 volumes justice. And I'm happy to say that day has finally come, as I got to wake up this morning to the best news possible. The official trailer to Netflix's Scott Pilgrim vs. the World, the anime. Produced by Edgar Wright, animated by the magnificent Science Saru, featuring the return of the spectacular cast from the movie, scored by Anna Managuchi, who provided the soundtrack for the video game, with an art style that emulates the look of the later 3 volumes. This is the ultimate Scott Pilgrim experience, and it's everything I've been waiting for. And I just need to gush, man! All we really know is that it'll be 8 episodes. And I'm not sure if this is just gonna be season 1 or just a one and done. So far, this seems to be a pretty faithful adaptation of the graphic novels. So if they follow it 1-to-1, and let's say they adapt about 2 to 3 chapters per episode, I do think these 8 episodes could cover the first 4 volumes, although I would prefer a little bit more. Which seems to be the case, given that Matthew Patel, Lucas Lee, Todd Ingram, and Roxy Richer all make appearances in this trailer, while the Katayanagi twins and Gideon Graves only seem to be alluded to. And those of course are the 3 X's that appear in volumes 5 and 6. And if we're only going up to volume 4, then that gives us about 2 episodes per Evil X. And I would love if they give us some more background on some of these characters, like Matthew Patel, because even in the graphic novel, there isn't much to him. And I'm really hoping to see things like Scott's unemployment arc, him learning to get a job, him moving in with Ramona leaving him and going MIA for months. Inclusions of characters who played a role in the graphic novel but didn't really appear in the movie, like Lisa. Or, although they appeared in the movie but literally had no lines, the Katayanagi twins. It blows my mind they literally said nothing in the movie when they're some of my favorite villains in the graphic novels. They're such pretentious, perfect assholes. This anime really has a chance to drive home that Scott and Ramona aren't really good people. They're not supposed to be cool and they're not supposed to be idolized. They're both prone to neglecting their responsibilities and the people they love. They both have a nasty habit of ghosting people. They both struggle with taking accountability for their actions. They're both people who don't want to hurt others, but because they refuse to acknowledge their faults, they absolutely do. At their core, they're just flawed people who, through loving one another, become way less terrible people. Which is also why I'm hoping Knives is done justice in this anime, because she really isn't in the movie. Again, they had to speedrun everyone's arc, and it works for what the movie is going for. But I think her arc of trying to transform herself into someone she thinks Scott would love, only for her to come to her senses and come to terms with the fact that Scott is kind of just an immature bum who doesn't have his shit together, works so much better as a slow burn, like what we saw in the books. At the end of the day, the movie takes place over the course of a week. The books take place over the course of a year. Clearly, the movie was always going to have to pick and choose what they would pull from the books. And the last book wasn't even finished when the movie dropped. I'm really not trying to give it a hard time. Again, I still love it. I'm just so ecstatic that everything I loved about the books finally have a chance at being exposed to an audience of millions of people who love the movie, but for one reason or another, we're never going to give the graphic novels the time of day. But as I said earlier, I became kind of bitter that the movie was the most accessible version of the story because to a lot of people, it painted this image that it was okay to be an asshole. As long as you're quirky and funny, you'll still get the girl. And I can't really blame people for having that interpretation because, again, the movie speed runs through all of their arcs. Hell, Nega Scott? The Nega Chin! The manifestation of all of his toxic traits that he tries to ignore is pretty much glossed over and played for a joke at the very end of the movie. Whereas in the graphic novels, Scott's battle with Nega Sky is one of the most intense and emotional moments of his entire arc, where he has to come to terms with all of the damage that he's done. It's the moment where he truly realizes he can't run from his problems anymore. And I just want people to experience moments like that so badly. Oh, and Mr. Chow, Knives' badass katana-wielding father who hunts down Scott for hurting his daughter? That's the kind of sweet catharsis the people need. And just so we're clear, I don't hate Scott at all because I'm not afraid to admit that I like flawed characters. Do I agree with their actions? Of course not. Did he still make me laugh a lot? Did I still want him to end up with Ramona? Was I rooting for him to become a better person? Yes, yes, and yes. And although there's a fair share of people who don't really dig Michael Cera's portrayal of Scott, I think he's gonna knock it out of the park in the anime. Because if you watch that old Adult Swim short, even if you don't agree with him as a live-action Scott, I think there's no denying that he rules as an animated Scott.
This is the best St. Joel's could muster?
That's not what your mom said last night!
He's a really good fit. I think they all are. If this anime is a smash hit, who knows what other Scott Pilgrim content we could get in the future. Look, I know we gotta let franchises die and tell the story that needs to be told, but I would love something like a new graphic novel that's set in the Scott Pilgrim universe that doesn't necessarily focus on Scott. And if capitalism is how we get there, then so be it. Alright, I think I screamed enough for one video. I didn't really even articulate all of my thoughts in this video, but my mind is just racing a gajillion miles an hour right now. The hype train has left the station, and I'm so glad that this anime drops the day after my birthday. I'm just so stoked. And if you want to keep up with my hyperfixation of Scott Pilgrim, why not hit that subscribe button? If me saying hyperfixation instead of obsession made you roll your eyes, then yell at me over on Twitter and Instagram at AwestruckVox. Animation forever. I'll talk to you guys later. Peace.